Uh, This is the hearing on the Committee on Labor and Tourism, and today is February 2nd. It's right now, it's 9:08. We're going to call the hearing to order. Before we get started, I'd like to go through some of the rules we have for today's hearing. My name is Richard Onishi. I represent the 3rd District on Hawaii Island, and I am the chair. And I'd like the members to introduce themselves, starting with the vice chair. Vice chair.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jackson Sayama. I represent District 20. I'm the vice chair of this committee.
Representative Kobayashi.
Dale Kobayashi, representing District 23.
Representative Ho.
Thanks, Chair.
Bring the mic.
Daniel Holtz, the representative, District 29, Kalihi and Chinatown.
Representative
Thank you, Chair. Representative Val Okimoto, representing District 36.
Representative Greg Takayama, proud to represent Pearl City.
Representative Albaladi.
Good morning, Representative Della Velati.
Okay, thank you, members. So this year, due to the pandemic, all hearings will be live streamed via Zoom. So please make sure that the volume on your laptops and your phones are turned to silent. We'll be hearing testimony in the following order: governmental, federal, state, and county agencies, industry groups, then individuals. When you come up to testify, please state your name and agency that you represent. In order to allow as many people to testify as possible, there'll be a standing 2-minute time limit per testifier, unless we have a large volume of testifiers on a bill, and that 2-minute might be reduced lower. Because morning hearings must adjourn prior to the noon floor session, all testifiers may have the opportunity to testify. But in the event, please know that your written testimonies will be considered by the committee. Please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is complete. The Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. Please use the chat only for technical issues. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of a catastrophic network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision-making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from the hearing without the ability to rejoin. So today we have 5 bills. The first, we are going to be taking Bill HB 838 out of order. This bill is relating to the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, clarifies the meaning of program or activity receiving state financial assistance, excludes cases within the scope of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act from the jurisdiction of the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission. First up to testify, we have William Hosijo, Hawaii Civil Rights Commission. See there? No. Okay, moving on, we have James Gasho, National Federation of the Blind of Hawaii. Mr. Gasho?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll get my video going here. Just one second. Oh, it won't, it says the host won't let me start the video, so I'll just, oh, now, here we go. Okay, good. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm James Gashel, and I'm testifying today on behalf of the National Federation of the Blind of Hawaii. I'm a resident of Honolulu. Thank you very much for scheduling this hearing and actually moving it up because I have another one following it on HB 838. Now, you know, this bill restores jurisdiction of the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission over issues of discrimination that are disability-based and that are also covered by the prohibition in Section 504 of the Federal Rehabilitation Act. NFBH strongly supports this bill. It's made necessary due to the Supreme Court's decision in Hawaii Tech Academy case in 2017. HB 838 is intended to make clear the legislature's intent that the civil rights law, which is 3681.5, still applies when the federal law also applies. And the Supreme Court's decision has kind of turned the presence of federal funds into a circuit breaker. I've stated lots of reasons in the written testimony. I don't need to go over that. I just wanted to have you put a face and voice together with the issue and to say mahalo for having this hearing, and we really need this bill to pass. Mahalo.
Thank you, Mr. Gasol. Others providing written testimony is Kirby Shaw with the Disability and Communication Access Board in support. Louis Estershek, Hawaii Disabilities Rights Center in support. Brandon Young, individual in support. And Peter Fritsch, individual in support. Members, do you have any questions on this bill? Yes, Representative Albalari.
Is Mr. Hoshijo here? And I apologize. Am I on for volume?
He doesn't appear to be on.
Okay, Chair. I would have had a question regarding enforcement and commission's resources. So I guess if this bill moves forward, I'll ask my question then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? Okay, if not, we will be doing decision-making on the bills after we've heard all the bills. Okay, moving back to the agenda, we're on Bill HB 465 relating to collective bargaining. Establishes the representative of labor on the Hawaii Labor Relations Board be a person selected by a majority of the exclusive representatives of the collective bargaining units. Establishes procedures for removal of the representative of labor on the Hawaii Labor Relations Board. So today we have okay, we have first up Riker Wada from the Office of Collective Bargaining in opposition. Mr.
Hi.
Wada?
Aloha, Honorable Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. My name is Riker Wada, representing the Office of Collective Bargaining for Governor David Ige. As you mentioned, House Bill 65, we are testifying in opposition to this particular measure. The Office of Collective Bargaining has concerns that the bill diminishes the governor's authority by compelling him to appoint a single individual as opposed to as a representative to the Hawaii Labor Relations Board. Currently, that process allows the governor to pick from a group of 3. We don't see any compelling reason to limit the pool of nominees. And I'd be happy to answer any questions by the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wada. Next up is Marcus Oshiro, Hawaii Labor Relations Board. Mr. Oshiro?
Okay, good morning, Chair Onishi. Good morning, Vice Chair Sayama. Good morning, Marcus Oshiro, Chair of the Hawaii Labor Relations Board. I have submitted written testimony on behalf of the board, but I just wanted to mention several paragraphs I think are worth noting this morning. On page 2, it reads, the current language of HRS 895 lays out that, quote, one member shall be representative of management, one member shall be representative of labor, and the third member, the chairperson, shall be representative of the public. By using representative of rather than representing, the legislature made it clear that the 3 board members should have different experiential backgrounds to ensure that the board can understand the arguments. Accordingly, each member's prior experience should qualify them for nomination by the governor and confirmation by the Senate. What the legislature did not state is that each board member must advocate for or represent a particular constituency in cases. Rather, all board members must faithfully listen to the presentations and consider any written arguments of all advocates, those from labor, management, and the public. After listening to the presentations and considering the written arguments, then the board must then make a decision based on the facts and the law. And finally, the legislature never presumed that the board members would decide a case solely based on their background or designated seat. If board members did so, that would lead to an untenable situation where parties would know how the majority of the board may rule before the case even began or lead to an eventual deadlock. I believe this will undermine the due process of all parties that must be given under the state constitution. I am available for any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oshiro. Next testifier is Randy Pereira, as an individual, I guess, or HGA. Mr.
Good
Pereira?
morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. Michelle Kurihara Klein on behalf of the Hawaii Government Employees Association and also on behalf of Randy Pereira, our Executive Director. HGEA, along with all of the 6 public sector unions, stand in strong support of this measure. The language of the bill is quite straightforward, and so don't want to reiterate the points that have already been made about the summary of the bill. However, I do want to stress that the unions feel that this is a fair and reasonable request for the individual to represent labor as the labor representative on the board, to for the unions to have a direct say in who sits on that seat, and also to create a process for removal of that person if labor feels that that individual is not representing their interests to the best of their ability. And so I'll be available to answer any questions should you have them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we also have written testimony from Christian Fur, University of Hawaii Professional Assembly, in support of the bill. Members, are there any questions?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair.
I'd like to direct my question towards Marcus Oshiro from the Hawaii Labor Relations Board.
Yes,
Mr.
Vice
Oshiro, can you clarify what is the responsibilities of this labor representative?
The labor representative seats on the board along with the representative from management and of course the board chair, who is representative of the public.
And do you see any merit in removing the other 2 options that the governor is provided with in nominating a representative?
That's a very good question. The current draft of the bill only authorizes and empowers the exclusive representatives, i.e. the public sector unions, to select and appoint the labor seat. That does not is that same right and privilege is not afforded the management seat nor the seat held by the public.
Thank you, Mr. Oshiro. Mr. Chair, I'd like to direct one more question towards the representative from HGA.
Sure.
Michelle, I would like to ask the same question. What is the merit of reducing governor's options from 3 to 1 in this case?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Representative. So oftentimes it's quite challenging to create a short list of 3 individuals who would be qualified. But the main purpose for this is that the governor has the opportunity to appoint not only the public representative, so the chair, but also the employer representative. And so allowing the governor to also appoint the labor representative gives the governor undue influence over who sits on the board. And because the governor, as he or she serves as an employer in many of the cases that are brought before the board, we believe that this is an unfair balance, and this is our way to rectify and create. It won't be equal, but to create additional balance for labor.
Thank you. No further questions, Chair.
Thank you. Representative Albalad.
My question is for Chair Oshiro. So an important aspect of this bill is the removal process. And in your testimony, you say that there is removal for cause. So what is the current process for removal? And when was the last time it has been implemented and executed on perhaps a member who has not maybe acted impartially?
Majority Leader Bellotti, that's a very good question. I really don't know the answer to that question because in all my years in the legislature, I have never heard of any board member being removed for cause from the Hawaii Labor Relations Board. I would assume it might be similar to maybe an impeachment type of proceeding, given that it's the state senate that does the appointment and does the confirmation of the governor's appointment.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? Okay, if there's none, we'll move on to the next bill, which is House Bill 567, relating to employment. Requires each department to establish a telework and alternative work schedule policy. Establishes a minimum percentage of eligible employees who are required to telework or use an alternative work schedule policy. Where feasible, requires departments to allow employees to act as a caregiver to telework or use an alternative work schedule. Testifiers, let's see. Cynthia Covell, DOE OTM Administration.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Cindy Covell, the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Talent Management for the Department of Education. On behalf of Superintendent Kishimoto, the department supports the intent of this bill. While we were in the early stages of the pandemic in spring 2020, we developed our first ever telework policy, and we have made improvements to it over time. The department sees telework and alternate work schedules in the future as supportive of our innovative strategies for teaching and learning. As we analyze our lessons learned and going forward from the pandemic, we do support this policy for improvements to our teaching and learning practices down in the future. We embrace the idea of modernizing our workplace personnel policies and support attracting and retaining talented employees. We look forward to working with our exclusive representatives to update our labor contracts. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I stand by to answer any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next up, Riker Wada, DHERD.
Hello, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, members of the committee, Riker Wada, representing the Department of Human Resources Development. We do stand in support of the intent of this particular measure. DHERD is in full support of the continued use of telework and alternate work week schedules. The current policy has been an invaluable tool and instrumental in the state's response to this current pandemic with COVID-19. However, we do need to point out, and this is reflected in our written testimony as well, that the issues pertaining to wages and work conditions have always been a subject of collective bargaining and may not be appropriate for this type of legislation. Currently, the state executive branch, DHERD, and the state have a negotiated 2010 MOU with the HGEA, which is primarily the public sector union that has members who are eligible to telework. Also, we have an alternate work week program to allow flexibility in employees' schedules, members' schedules. In response to the pandemic, DHERD also published interim guidelines, and this was primarily to address issues that I believe some of the measures, the issues in this particular measure are trying to address related to caregiving and the ability for people to do that as well while teleworking. I'd like to point out that the way we envision telework it's a tool. So DHERD has created a tool for the state executive branch, and you can use any one of our other tools to as an example. So for instance, a wrench. DHERD's created a wrench. We've then given that wrench to all of our executive branch departments, and then we provide guidance and assistance in how to use that particular wrench. Some departments who work with nuts and bolts are going to use that wrench a lot, and other departments who work, for instance, with paper will very rarely use that wrench, but will have access to it whenever it's needed. And all of that is going to be dependent on the particular operation of the department. And currently what I can tell you is that the wrench is working. And again, there are always one-offs and there will always be people who aren't quite happy with how that particular wrench is working, but it is working right now. The final concern that DHERD has, we expressed with this particular measure, is that mandating a specific percentage of employees who need to telework or use an alternate work week is kind of a one-size-fits-all manner, and it likely will impact operations and make operations difficult, if not impossible, for certain departments. And so we do raise that concern as well. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next up, Cara Dupola Carlos, Hawaii State Commission on the Status of Women.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members. My name is Cara Dupola Carlos. I'm going to keep my video off just so I can avoid any interruptions to you, if that's okay. Don't want my connection to fall through. Had that issue earlier. We've experienced at the Commission a really different perspective on how effective the telework policies, whether interim or the 2010 guidelines, have functioned during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to focus on the pandemic a little bit, but I also want to say this was an outstanding issue prior to the pandemic, and the telework ban, essentially it's a ban on telework while caregiving, is an example of overt sexism that remains in the workplace. The Women's Legislative Caucus included this bill in their package this year. I think it's one of the most important bills that you can pass to advance gender equity and make sure that women don't backslide even further as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've had women workers in crisis, particularly moms, from DBED, from DOH, clusters of workers at the judiciary, just across government, come to us explaining that there's been really inconsistent application of telework, even where telework can be done successfully. So again, we've seen a really different picture of how this has actually not been working during the crisis. And I don't want to say that telework, I don't want to romanticize it. I've been going through it myself with 2 toddlers. At one point during the pandemic, he was an infant. But it is really important to point out that sometimes caregiving just cannot be accommodated by the market or by the school system, right? And so it's critical that we avoid continued losses of women, quote unquote, voluntarily leaving the workforce, which we are documenting because of inhospitable telework policies, and also just a lack of sensitivity and understanding about how serious this issue is. So we ask that you pass this measure, and we're willing, we're more than happy to work with the folks at the table who have concerns. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next up, Young-hee Overly, AAUW of Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayoma, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Young-hee Overly, and I am the Public Policy Chair for AAUW of Hawaii. We strongly support HB 567. In addition to what is shared in our written testimony, I wanted to share an opinion based on my personal experience with telework. I retired from IBM after 30 years of service. And for 13 of those 30 years, I managed the teams around the world, some who worked from IBM office and some who worked from home. And I also personally teleworked for 6 of those 30 years. As a working parent, and I say working parent instead of working mom, because I also managed employees, working dads, who took advantage of telework. So as a working parent, I loved working from home and am forever grateful to IBM and my management. And I specifically say my management because IBM had a policy of letting each department to decide what to do. So again, I am forever grateful to IBM and my management for allowing me such a flexibility. And as a manager, what I learned is how important it is for each department to have a strategy for online collaboration and clear communication when you are working with others from various locations. I also recommend setting up a company-wide, in this case, it will be Hawaii state government-wide, support structure with tools and training and best practices. Best practices that's developed based on each department's experience. So again, thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I am available for questions.
Thank you very much. Next testifier is Osai Tui from HSTA.
Good morning, Chair Onishi and members of the committee. I'm also Tue, Vice President of HSTA, speaking on behalf of President Corey Rosenlee. HSTA, especially as a bargaining unit composed primarily of professional women, respectfully asks for your support on House Bill 567. Offering options for telework is just good policy and benefits not only employees, but also our state government as the employer, our communities, the environment, and more. This pandemic has shown that unless it's mandated, administrators are not inclined to make the most rational decisions when it comes to telework. With that, HSTA stands on its submitted testimony. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Members, we have additional written testimony. Carolyn Kunitake, individual in support. Jean Evans, individual in support. Amy Brinker, individual in support. Susan Wartzberg, individual in support. Catherine Bakotsi, individual in support. Janet Morris, individual in support. Elizabeth Hansen, individual in support. The Department of Health in support. Darcy Iwashita, individual in support. Kathleen Algar, Hawaii Children's Action Network speaks in support. Catherine Aukuni, Cologne, BCCA with comments. Jay Butai, Director, Department of Transportation in support. Stacy Aldrich, Hawaii Public Library System with comments. Max Otani, Department of Public Safety with comments. Randy Pereira, individual in support. And Laurie Field, Planned Parenthood Votes Northwest and Hawaii in support. Members, do you have any questions? Yes, Representative Albalati.
Thank you. I have a question for Riker Water, please.
Hey, good morning, Rep. Alati.
Thank you. So what we learned during this pandemic was that while DHERD may have some guidance and MOU, the departments didn't necessarily have a policy to which their employees could refer to and then work out whatever telework policies they needed to do to be able to work through this pandemic. So is there a pathway through this bill to at least establish a policy? And what we've heard from your departments is that from department to department, it's different. Your libraries don't operate 24, they don't work on a Monday through Friday schedule. They work on a Monday through Saturday schedule, but DCCA may be doing something different. So why isn't it reasonable, as I think it is, for us to expect that each department have a written policy that our employees can refer to?
No, that's a very good question, Rep. Belatti. I think part of it is semantics, honestly. The policy that is in existence is DHERD's policy. It covers the entire executive branch. And I want to point out that we currently don't, that doesn't cover, for instance, the other semi-executive branch departments, like, for instance, the Department of Education or the university. So the policy actually covers everyone, and the implementation of that policy is up to each department. So for instance, for DHERD specifically, and I can speak to this, we had just about 100% of our employees teleworking to some extent over the course during the times of the pandemic. And that could range anywhere for 1 day to 2 days. And some people, it was all, 40 hours a week, they were teleworking. There are other departments, for instance, that don't have as easy a path to telework. So for instance, the Department of Public Safety, many of their employees cannot telework and for different reasons, but primarily operationally, they can't do that. So as I was mentioning earlier, the telework policy that DHERD has, and we've negotiated with HGEA, that's the policy that covers everyone. And the actual implementation, that's the tool that's given to everyone. The implementation and how people use that tool really is up to the departments. And so I think to answer this is a very long roundabout way of answering your question. Again, the telework falls into collective bargaining. So I'm putting on both my DHERD as well as OCB hat, but it falls into collective bargaining. So I suspect what will happen is if each department needs to or is mandated to draft their own policy, each of the departments is going to have to consult with one or more of the unions regarding the actual implementation of this. And that, I think, long-term will probably lead to problems because as different departments have different policies, it's going to create havoc among the state executive branch anyway.
Chair, if I could just ask a quick follow-up.
Sure.
So if it's semantics, and let's not call it policy, let's say implementation plan. I mean, I think it's fair for us to ask for an implementation plan per each department because frankly, during this pandemic, we saw very frustrated employees who were afraid to come back to work. And there was no plan for them to telework at a time when DOH was saying people shouldn't be going to work. I mean, I feel like we were caught in a really bad situation and we need to have clarity around this because telework is here to stay. So if there's a way to make this bill something that's workable, like for example, maybe not having the specific targets, would that be something that you could work on?
Yeah, definitely, Chair. And again, we're definitely happy to work with the stakeholders in for this particular bill on what's going forward. What I can share with the committee as well is DHERD did do, and I'm not going to say post pandemic because we're still sitting squarely in it, but we've done a telework survey across the entire executive branch. The response we got back, and we got probably about a 35% response ratio, which is fairly good, I think, and I'm not a pollster by any means, but was largely favorable. It was above 60% were happy with the way telework was instituted throughout the executive branch. We have above 75% who were teleworking over the course of the pandemic, and a large percentage, I believe it was high 60s to low 70s, are interested in continuing telework throughout in the future. And so we're happy to work on this. I think the way that, again, DHERD / the Office of Collective Bargaining have been addressing this is we're working on the next round of negotiation for this particular policy. And it will be, again, primarily with HTA, but probably with some of our other unions. And again, I do give the caveat, we're not talking about our other, like the DOE and the University of Hawaii. But we'd be happy to continue working on this.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Riker.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing that there are none, let's move on to the next bill. The next bill is HB 653, relating to payments of support, includes tips or gratuities paid directly to an individual by a customer of the employer and reported or declared to the employer under the definition of income used to calculate payments of child or spousal support. First, or the only testifier we have providing written testimony is Brandon Flores from the Attorney General's office. Members, since he's not here to testify in person, I don't know that we could ask anybody any questions. So with that, we'll move on to our last bill, is HB 670, relating to the employees retirement system, authorizes forfeiture of certain ERS benefits pursuant to court order for state or county employees and designated beneficiaries who are convicted of an employment-related felony. First up to testify is Common Cause Sandy Ma, Common Cause Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee.
Good morning.
Good morning. Common Cause Hawaii stands in support of this bill. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them, but our testimony is comprehensive, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ma. Members, we have written testimony from Dyson Chi, individual in support, David Anderson, Common Cause Hawaii board member in support, Edward B. Hanel Jr., individual in support, Talak Tokuda, individual in support, Martha Nakajima, individual in support, Kathy Jaycox, individual in support, Barbara Shimimi, individual, I guess, well, I don't know, Indivisible Hawaii maybe is an organization, but in support, Michael Gologuch Jr., individual in support, Natalie Iwasa, individual in support, ERS Hawaii, with comments, and Laurie Boyle, individual in support. Members, are there any questions? If there are none, we're going to recess for decision. Okay, let's call a hearing back to order. Decision making on these bills. First for HB 465. We'll be making a change to page 3, line 6, to add the words "and 8 consecutive years" and any technical amendments needed for clarity. Members, any questions? Vice Chair for the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 465 with amendments. Chair?
Aye.
Vice Chair votes aye with reservations. Representative Bellotti.
Aye.
Representative Holt.
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Quinlan. Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Okimoto.
Thank you, members. The next bill, HB 567. There are both sides of this issue that we need to consider. So we're going to be converting this bill in order to conduct a study, which will be done by Legislative Reference Bureau. We'll be reporting back to the legislature their findings and recommendations next year so that we can move this issue forward. Members, any questions? Vice Chair for the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 567 with amendments. Chair?
Aye.
Vice Chair votes aye. Representative Bellotti.
Aye.
Representative Holt. Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Quinlan. Representative Takayama. Representative Okimoto.
Okay, the next bill is HB 653. Based on the Attorney General's testimony, we're going to be deferring this bill. The next bill is HB 670. This bill, we're going to do technical amendments as needed. Vice Chair, members' questions? Okay, Vice Chair for the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 670 with amendments. Chair?
Aye.
Vice Chair votes aye. Representative Bellotti.
Aye.
Representative Holt.
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Quinlan. Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Okimoto.
Okay, thank you, members. And the final bill is HB 838. And this bill also, we're going to be making necessary technical amendments. Any questions, members? Vice Chair for the vote.
The recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 838 with amendments. Chair?
Aye.
Vice Chair votes aye. Representative Bellotti.
Aye.
Representative Holt.
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Quinlan. Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Okimoto.
Thank you, members. Okay, that concludes this hearing. We are adjourned.